3,000 head of sheep, and suddenly not one would step forward another inch.
What's wrong with you animals? Move. Now.
But the flock had already fanned around something unseen, as if the plain itself had drawn a line no animal would cross. Gary swung down from his horse and walked into the circle of ground the sheep refused to touch. He knelt and pressed his gloved hand against the dirt. The leather grew warm in seconds. He yanked off the glove and laid his calloused palm flat. The heat was definite.
This isn't sun heat. Something underneath is giving off warmth.
In 20 years of running sheep across this high country, he'd never felt the earth give back heat that didn't come from the sky. The sheep had already moved on, grazing easy, but Gary stayed kneeling, his hand pressed into that impossible patch.
Mark it. Don't ever forget where that spot is.
11 days later, almost to the hour, the flock stopped again, tails rotating, heads high.
Same thing. Different spot. You feel it too?
He knelt again, pressed his bare palm flat. The heat came up steady, the same wrong warmth as before.
11 days. I should have kept count after the first.
He pulled a bright orange flag from his saddlebag and drove the wire stake into the soft ground.
If there's a third patch in 11 more days, then it's not just the ground being strange.
The sheep, once the strange spot was behind them, grazed on as if nothing had happened. Gary marked the date in his log and set a mental alarm. 11 days, 3 acres, moving location.
It moves. Not a hot spring, not a fault. Something underneath that wants the sheep away.
By the 4th cycle, he no longer hesitated. He flagged every new warm spot without needing to feel the dirt first, week after week. The orange flags multiplied across the BLM ground, like a strange crop no one planted.
19 of them now. Every 11 days, new ground warms up, and the sheep won't touch it.
He squatted by each flag, punched the coordinates into his handheld GPS, and scribbled notes in a journal.
I am not just a herder anymore. I am mapping something that shouldn't be here.
By August, the flags were so many he could see the shape they made from a distance, though he refused to trace it.
Alan at the university knows geology. If anyone can explain this, it's him.
He sat at his campfire one evening, the dogs asleep, and composed a satellite message on his phone. Found warm ground sheep avoid. Cycle of 11 days. Any ideas?
If he says it's just a hot spring, I'll know I am losing my mind out here.
He hit send, watched the progress bar crawl, and then the desert went quiet again under the stars, 300 miles away. In a cramped university office, Dr. Alan Kettner opened the satellite message and immediately opened every USGS file he had.
Gary, these coordinates you sent, they don't match a single known geothermal feature in the state.
He checked fault lines, old mining surveys, buried pipelines. The ground should be dead and cold in those spots.
Not one thermal anomaly. Not even a fluctuation. What is he feeling out there?
By the time Alan called, Gary had moved the flock 3 miles. The satellite phone crackled in the high wind.
I've run every subsurface database I can access. No hot springs, no fault leakage, no buried infrastructure. What are you actually feeling?
Warm earth, Alan. The sheep won't graze it. And it stays warm for about a day, then cools. And it happens every 11 days. New spot.
Every 11 days? That can't be geothermal. No system cycles that fast. Gary, this isn't showing up on any sensor I can get my hands on.
So it's something satellites can't see and geologists can't explain. That leaves a short list.
2 men, 100 miles of empty desert between them, and a list of 19 coordinates that answered nothing. Late that night, Alan locked his office door and spread a fresh BLM allotment map across his desk. Each coordinate became a red pushpin.
19 points shouldn't form anything, but these don't look like noise.
He connected them with thread. The shape that emerged stopped his hand.
Gary, I've plotted your coordinates. They form a figure. It isn't random.
What figure? Like a circle? A line?
Number. It's precise, angular. almost like a symbol. I can't identify it. I've never seen this arrangement in any geological survey.
Alan scanned the map and sent it. Gary found a computer at a ranger station and opened the file.
That shape isn't natural. It's a pattern someone or something intended.
On screen, the red dots floated against the satellite image of the red desert, connected by lines that followed no road, fence, or drainage.
The desert isn't empty. It's been marking me while I marked it.
He finished the season like a man closing a book he was afraid to read again.
I need to know if that figure means something. Maybe it's an old survey mark, something the BLM forgot.
He called Alan from a highway motel, voice lower than usual, and asked about any historical map that matched the figure.
I've looked at every survey from 1890 onward. No record of any intentional pattern. No mining claim, no boundary marker, no Native American effigy documented there. It's as if the land itself drew it, and only recently.
Gary thanked him and hung up. The silence in the motel room felt deeper than any desert night.
2 maps say the same thing. This place is not empty, and I am not meant to understand why.
He put the notebook away and promised himself he'd never run sheep on that ground again. But the BLM contract was already signed for next summer.
1 more summer. Then I am done.
The winter passed with no new answers, only the weight of a second season waiting under the snow. May came, and Gary drove the flock back onto the same BLM ground, trailer rocking over ruts he'd left the year before.
I'll see if it starts again. 11 days. Same as before.
On the 11th morning, the lead ewes stopped short, ears flat, as if the ground ahead were suddenly forbidden.
Same refusal. Different grass.
He knelt and pressed his bare hand flat. The warmth came up steady, a betrayal he'd hoped was only seasonal.
It's here to stay. The cycle isn't a fluke.
He drove the first orange flag in the new location. The plastic cracked in the wind like a dry whisper.
Now I have to map it again. Alan said the figure changes. I need to see what it becomes this year.
Over the weeks, he fell back into the rhythm. Every 11 days, another flag, another coordinate. The count climbed past 18.
I'll send the list when I have enough. But part of me already knows the answer won't make this easier.
He copied the last set of coordinates into the notebook and walked to the ranger station. The email landed in Alan's inbox before midnight, and by sunrise he had the new map pinned open.
Not the same figure. Not even close. This one curves where the first one ran straight. Gary, the pattern is completely different. It's like a new message drawn over the old one.
If it changes every summer, then it isn't a marker. It's something alive.
On the screen, the 2 figures lay side by side, speaking a language neither man could read. The hope that the figure was an old forgotten survey evaporated. The desert was still writing.
He stared at the maps, 2 summers of unreadable symbols, and felt the ground shift under him even here. What does it want, Alan? What's down there that needs a new shape every year?
I don't know, but I think you shouldn't be the one to find out.
After the call, Gary walked out of the ranger station and stood in the empty parking lot, the desert air suddenly heavier against his skin.
He told me to stop, but I've got 2 more months on this lease.
The second map was still open on the station computer. He went back inside and stared at the glowing lines.
That isn't a shape geology makes. It's deliberate, and it's looking back at me.
He closed the browser, drove to the flock in silence, and didn't speak to the dogs for the rest of the day.
The ground isn't just warm, it's marking something, and it knows I am here.
That night, the camp felt smaller. The fire died down to red coals, and the border collies paced instead of resting.
I'll finish this season and never come back. The BLM can find another herder.
He didn't sleep. Every star seemed to watch, and the earth kept its heat just below the surface, waiting for the next cycle.
Something's moving down there, and I am standing right on top of it.
Gary struck the last camp of the second summer, with the same deliberate care he'd used for 20 years.
I could send the coordinates to Alan again, but I already know what he'll say.
He packed the GPS unit and the maps into a steel box and closed the lid.
The BLM won't believe it. And if they do, they'll shut down this allotment. Or worse, they'll think I am crazy.
He decided then he would not report the warm spots. He loaded the last of his gear onto the trailer and didn't look back at the flagged ground.
Let someone else map it. I am done.
The truck pulled onto the highway, and the desert retreated in the mirror. He had never run sheep on that allotment again, and he never would.
Whatever moves under that land can keep its secrets.
20 years vanished like morning frost in the high desert. Gary Mitchell, now 70, returned to the Red Desert alone.
The ground still looks the same, but I know what's underneath hasn't changed either.
He'd never spoken of the warm spots to anyone after Alan, not his wife, not the other herders. Then, from a ridge, he saw them. A flock of sheep moving across the same old BLM ground, and a young herder walking behind them.
Someone's still running sheep here. After all this time.
Gary picked his way down the slope, his old legs remembering the uneven ground.
Good flock you've got there. Mind if an old herder walks with you a piece?
Sure. Not many folks out here. You work this country before?
Gary nodded, but something in his eyes shifted. The land still held its secret, and he was walking right over it again.
If he asks about the warm spots, I'll tell him the truth, but he won't.
They walked together for half an hour, the flock flowing around them like a slow white river.
You ever notice how the sheep sometimes won't graze a patch, like there's a line they won't cross?
Animals have their whims. You learn not to question everything out here.
It's more than whims. The ground feels different. My dogs won't walk on it.
He's felt it. He knows about the warmth. Different how? You mean hot spots?
Warm, maybe. The older herders I learned from, they said to keep the sheep away from it. They didn't say why.
60 years of whispered warnings, and he's handing me the thread.
Gary kept his voice even, but the years fell away, and he was back kneeling on that impossible ground.
I figure it's something from way back. They say not to ask too many questions. So you've seen them yourself? The warm spots? I thought maybe it was just me.
Gary's heart stopped for a beat. He had not spoken about those patches in over 2 decades.
Yes, I've felt them. More times than I care to remember.
Ben didn't look surprised. He glanced at the flock, then back at Gary with a quiet understanding.
The old herder who taught me, he was firm about it. Don't let your sheep eat the warm grass. He'd say,
60 years of whispered warnings, and not one of them explained. The secret was in the silence.
They never gave a reason. Just said it was safer to stay away. I figure they knew what mattered.
Silence settled between them, thicker than the midday heat, and Gary felt the weight of 2 summers press down.
Don't ask. Whatever is down there, it's not for you to know. The warning is enough.
Gary nodded once, and the desert seemed to exhale. The warning had been passed on without a word. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The wind moved the sagebrush, and the sheep grazed on, as if nothing had happened.
He knows as much as I do, and that's nothing. The warning is the only scripture here.
I am glad it isn't just me. Sometimes out here, you start to doubt your own senses.
Number. Doubt can keep you alive, but not out here. Here. You trust what the sheep tell you.
Ben looked at the ground, then back at Gary, and something passed between them. A recognition that needed no more words.
I could ask 100 questions and still be afraid. Better to let the desert keep its reasons.
They stood together until the light began to change, and the flock drifted east.
I should move them before dark. You know how it is.
I know. Good ground to you.
Gary watched the young herder and his flock dissolve into the sage, and the old fear settled into something almost like peace. Gary lingered on the ridge, long after Ben had vanished. The desert seemed to stretch wider than it had that morning.
2 different summers, 2 different figures, and still no closer to why.
He remembered the printed maps on Alan's desk, the red threads connecting dots that should have meant nothing.
Maybe it was a warning. Maybe just a hello. Neither would change anything now.
He turned his back on the allotment and walked toward the road, his hiking stick tapping a slow rhythm. The ground underfoot was cold. It always was, except when it chose not to be.
When? That word stuck. The warmth made its own schedule, and no man had the right to ask.
He stopped once, at the boundary of the old lease, and looked back. No flags remained, no marks, but somewhere out there, another spot was already warming for the next cycle, and the next.
The desert would keep its secret, and maybe that was the only mercy it offered.
Gary continued walking, the road ahead empty. The memory of the warm spots felt distant now, almost like a story he'd heard.
The figures on those maps, I can still see them. The first one like a jagged arrow, the second like a slow curve. Both said nothing and everything.
He'd spent 2 summers, convinced the ground was trying to speak. Maybe it was, but the language wasn't meant for him.
Alan must have wondered why I never sent the third year's coordinates. But I think he already knew the answer. There wasn't one.
The sun lowered, casting long shadows across the sage. Gary felt the familiar ache of a mystery that would never resolve.
I've carried this longer than I carried my flock, and it's lighter now. Not because it's gone, but because I've stopped trying to lift it.
He paused at a small rise, looking back at the allotment one last time. The land looked peaceful, indifferent.
If it's a warning, it's not for me to decode. If it's a hello, then I've already answered by leaving.
He turned and continued walking. The desert asked nothing more of him.
Maybe that's what the old herders meant. Don't let your sheep eat the warm grass, and don't let your mind chew on what it can't digest.
In the years that followed, Gary never spoke of the warm spots to anyone again. Not his wife, not Alan, not a soul. The GPS unit and the maps stayed in the steel box. The coordinates never sent. He never learned what the third summer would have drawn. The orange flags he had planted across the BLM ground snapped in the wind over the years, or were trampled by deer. But the warning did not break. It passed from old herder to young, word of mouth, without paper or proof. Ben had heard it from his teacher. Gary heard it from Ben. A chain of silence that stretched back 60 years or more. The BLM never learned of the warm spots. The allotment stayed open, and sheep still grazed it year after year. And every 11 days, somewhere on that ground, a patch of earth grew warm, and the sheep would not walk there. The figures traced that first summer and the second were never explained, never named. They were not meant to be. The herders who came after kept the same rule. Do not let your sheep eat the warm grass. No reasons given. The desert kept its rhythm, and the herders kept theirs, a silent agreement that the land was not for the curious. Gary stood at the edge of the old BLM lease, the same boundary he had crossed on horseback 20 years ago.
The ground looks unchanged. Same sage, same sky. But it's not the same ground.
He lowered himself onto one knee, the motion slower now, and pressed his palm flat against the dust. The dust was cool, but something deeper seemed to hum, a memory not meant to fade.
I can still feel it. Not in the dirt, but in my boots, in my bones, the heat that didn't belong.
He got to his feet and looked out across the allotment, the afternoon heat shimmering over the sage.
Somewhere out there, a patch is warming right now, and every 11 days, another, drawing a figure no one will map.
The wind pulled at his hat, a high mountain gust that carried no secrets, only the sound of distance.
I was never meant to understand. The warmth was just the surface of something much older.
He turned away from the lease line and started back toward the road, the phantom heat still pressing against his soles. Across that same allotment, a flock of sheep moved like a slow current and then parted around an invisible shore. A 3-acre circle of ground shimmered with heat that had no business being there, a cloak of distortion above the sage. Nearby, a single orange flag, faded and tattered, still clung to its wire stake, a marker no one had removed. The sheep grazed on, indifferent to the flag and the warmth, obeying a rule written into instinct or something older. 11 days later, the patch had cooled, and a new one began to warm half a mile east, drawing the next point of a figure no map would show. Satellites passed overhead and recorded only dust. The USGS database remained blank, unknowing, but the herders knew. They had always known, passing the warning like a cup of water in a dry place. The land did not threaten. It simply remained, patient and warm, tendering its mystery with each cycle. Somewhere on that ground, the pattern was completing itself, a geometry of heat that had no name and needed none. And the warning held. Do not let your sheep eat the warm grass, because the warmth was a door, and what lay beyond was not meant for grazing. The herders who run that ground now may never have heard of Gary Mitchell, but they carry the same rule. The warning was passed from voice to voice around campfires that look the same as his did. No one asks for proof, because the sheep prove it every 11 days, and the ground offers its own testimony. The BLM maps show nothing, but the herders' mental maps always include the patches the agency will never chart. Gary became one of the old ones who said nothing and knew everything that mattered. His name will not appear in any record, but his silence is threaded through the same chain that Ben now carries. 60 years of whispers, and maybe 60 more, because the desert does not explain itself. It only asks for a simple agreement. Keep the flock moving, and keep the grass uneaten. What lies beneath the warmth is not a secret to be solved, but a depth to be respected. And the herders, in their quiet way, will continue to respect it until the last cycle runs its course. The red desert stretched in every direction, sagebrush and silence the only landmarks. From high above, the allotment showed no trace of any figure, no sign that the ground had ever been warm. But the emptiness was only a surface, a lid over something that neither map nor instrument could capture. Somewhere down there, a patch was already gathering heat for the next cycle, invisible and patient. The sheep would avoid it, as they always had, and the herders would note the date without writing anything down. The wind erased the last footprints of men who had knelt there in confusion, trying to understand. Night crept over the desert, and the temperature dropped, but not everywhere. In one spot, it held steady. The stars came out, indifferent and ancient, watching over a secret that would outlast them all. And the warmth continued its slow, rhythmic circuit, writing a language that no one would ever read. The desert kept its silence, and the herders kept theirs. An old hand, weathered and calloused, descended toward the desert floor, and then stopped, hovering a breath above the dust. Below the palm, a faint heat shimmer twisted the air, rising not from the sun, but from somewhere deeper.
Almost warm enough to touch, but touching would answer nothing.
The fingers curled gently, and the hand withdrew, as if sealing an unspoken pact. Gary straightened, looking out across the darkening allotment, the scene unchanged from 20 years before. The last light drained from the sky, and the desert became a silhouette of itself. He turned away, his boots crunching over the cooled ground, the phantom heat fading with each step. Somewhere out there, the warmth was already beginning its slow migration, drawing the next point in a figure no one would trace. The herders would keep their rule. The sheep would keep their distance. The desert would keep its secret. And the image of that hovering hand, never quite making contact, became the final testament to a mystery that would outlast them all.